The movie begins with a mysterious scene. A human hand, wearing a black glove, injects a substance into the yolk of an egg. Moments later, the egg divides, producing an identical copy. At the same time, on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a star for Oscar-winning actress Elizabeth Sparkle is being unveiled. As time passes, the star fades, and Sparkle's name no longer shines as brightly. Elizabeth, now older, hosts an aerobics TV show. Despite her age, she remains fit and looks good. However, one day, while trying to use the restroom, she finds the women's room out of order and heads into the men's room. Inside, she overhears the voice of her show's producer, Harvey, saying that Elizabeth is outdated. He mentions they need a young and hot replacement, and it's time for her to retire. After all, he says, Elizabeth won her Oscar back when cinematography was just starting out, and now it's time for a new generation. Hurt by the news, Elizabeth meets Harvey for lunch. He casually announces her retirement, then leaves with a friend, laughing. Feeling helpless, Elizabeth notices a fly in her wine glass, mirroring how she feels. On her way home, distracted by workers taking down her billboard, she gets into an accident. At the hospital, the doctor recognizes her as the famous star and compliments her. But Elizabeth breaks down, crying over the loss of her fame. Embarrassed, the doctor leaves. A young nurse, however, begins examining Elizabeth's back and mutters that she's perfect for an experiment. Before leaving, the nurse slips a flash drive into Elizabeth's pocket. When Elizabeth later discovers the flash drive, she watches a commercial for a product called Substance, which promises to unlock DNA and initiate cell division, creating a younger version of the user. The product requires 2 versions of the same person, one being the Matrix, the original, and the other, the improved other you. The personalities must switch every 7 days and live in harmony as one being. Later, Elizabeth bumps into her old classmate Fred, who excitedly offers to catch up. He writes his number on a soggy piece of paper and gives it to her, but she pretends to be happy to see him while feeling deeply depressed. When she returns home, she finds a bouquet with a card thanking her for her years of work, which only deepens her sadness. Curious about the product she saw, Elizabeth inserts the flash drive into her TV again and watches the advertisement for Substance. The ad explains how the injection unlocks one's DNA, creating a new, younger version of themselves. The 2 personalities, Matrix and the other you, must exist in symbiosis, switching places every 7 days, while remembering that they are still one person. Haunted by loneliness, Elizabeth goes to a bar. Watching happy couples, she realizes how isolated she feels. After a long night of reflection, she finally calls the number from the commercial and orders the substance. She is told to pick it up from a postbox. The next morning, Elizabeth sees an ad in the paper searching for a replacement for her TV show. At the same time, she receives a letter with the postbox number for her substance package. Determined, Elizabeth retrieves the package and opens it at home. Inside, the components are neatly labeled: activator, stabilizer, the other you, the switch, food for the Matrix, and food for the other you. Elizabeth learns that the activator is a one-time injection, while the stabilizer must be used daily, drawn from the Matrix cells. Most importantly, the 2 versions must switch every 7 days without exception. The next morning, after staring at her aging reflection, Elizabeth injects the activator. Intense pain overwhelms her as she collapses to the floor. Her back splits open, and from within emerges a younger, more beautiful version of herself. This new version, now calling herself Sue, is thrilled with her appearance. However, when she notices Elizabeth's unconscious body, she stitches up the tear in her back and tucks her away in bed. The next morning, Sue showers and feels a sudden weakness. She quickly injects herself with the stabilizer, drawn from Elizabeth's spine, and revives her strength. Sue begins enjoying her new youth and beauty, buying a seductive swimsuit before heading to a casting call. She introduces herself as Sue and makes a stunning impression, even captivating Harvey. Sue is chosen to replace Elizabeth as the host of the TV show, cleverly telling Harvey that she will leave every 7 days to care for her sick mother, an excuse that endears her to everyone. However, the week flies by, and it's time for the switch. Sue attaches special tubes to her arms, allowing the substance to flow through. Soon, Elizabeth awakens, and Sue's body slips into a coma. Elizabeth cleans herself up and heads to the TV studio, where Harvey presents her with a farewell gift from the crew. Back home, Elizabeth begins marking the days on her calendar when she can be herself. She spends all her time at home, and by the end of the week, she receives a message notifying her that a new batch of the substance has been delivered to her postbox. After 7 days, Elizabeth and Sue switch bodies again. Sue, relishing her new life, stars in commercials and basks in her growing popularity. However, one day, Sue starts thinking about Elizabeth's body, the Matrix, and secretly builds a hidden room in the bathroom. Just as Sue finishes her work, a neighbor knocks on the door, complaining about the noise. Seeing Sue, the man is instantly charmed and offers to help, but Sue slams the door in his face. She hides Elizabeth's body in the secret room and replaces a portrait of Elizabeth with one of herself. Sue's show becomes a massive hit, with the ratings soaring, much to the producer's delight. She starts making new friends and attends glamorous parties. One evening, she brings a young man home, but when things begin to get intimate, she suddenly feels unwell. She remembers it's time for the switch. Sue hurries to the secret room and performs an additional stabilization procedure, allowing her to spend the night with the man. However, she delays the switch longer than she should have. When Elizabeth wakes up, she finds the living room in disarray and notices her hands are now twisted with gout. Struggling to regain her composure, she calls the substance provider's number. They inform her that the changes to her body are irreversible and remind her that she and Sue are one whole. Elizabeth tidies up the apartment and watches Sue's show on TV, reluctantly admitting how beautiful Sue is. Later, Elizabeth hears the neighbor asking Sue out on a date, but she doesn't answer the door. Soon after, Elizabeth receives a new batch of the substance. On her way out, she stops at a cafe, where an old man strikes up a conversation, lamenting how long it takes to return to one's body. As he drops his cards, Elizabeth sees one identical to her own substance card. She recognizes the young nurse who had advised her about the experiment in the man's eyes. He warns her that with each switch, it becomes harder to remember that she deserves the right to exist. The second version will eventually start consuming her. Elizabeth rushes home, bumping into Sue's boyfriend along the way. Of course, he doesn't recognize her, but the encounter reminds her of Fred. She calls his number, and her ecstatic old classmate arranges a meeting at a cafe. Elizabeth dresses up, puts on makeup, and hides her hands under gloves. However, on her way out, she sees a billboard of Sue and is immediately disappointed by her reflection. She changes her makeup, but soon wipes it off completely, crying. She tears off her dress and stays home, ignoring Fred's persistent calls, binge-eating to cope with her feelings of stress and insecurity. When it's Sue's turn again, she steps onto the set to film her show. However, during the exercises, she suddenly feels something protruding beneath her skin. Startled, she halts the filming. The cameraman is puzzled by what he just recorded, but Sue rushes to the bathroom. There, she discovers a lump on her backside and pulls out a fried chicken leg from her navel. Sue realizes that while she's living a glamorous life, Elizabeth has been binge-eating at home. Furious, Sue complains to the substance operator, but all she hears is the familiar reminder, "You are one whole." Weeks pass, and one day Sue summons Harvey urgently to announce that she will host the network's New Year's Eve show, the pinnacle of her career. Sue is overjoyed. However, she starts abusing the stabilizer more and more, causing Elizabeth's body to age rapidly. When Elizabeth wakes up again, she finds herself old, decrepit, with stiff joints and nearly all her hair gone gray. Desperate, Elizabeth calls the substance provider, who suggests ending the experiment. But there is no way to reverse her condition now. Elizabeth tries to convince herself to stop, but she can't bring herself to give up the beautiful second version of herself, despite her knees barely working. She remembers Harvey's gift, a cookbook. She throws herself into learning new recipes with a burst of renewed energy, while Sue continues to dominate the TV screens. One day, Elizabeth overhears Sue mocking her, calling her an old and washed-up star. This drives Elizabeth into a binge-eating frenzy, her anger boiling over. She vows to end the experiment. When the next switch occurs, Sue finds the apartment filled with leftover food and empty bottles. To maintain her independence, Sue stockpiles stabilizers, enough to last for 3 months. However, just before the live broadcast of the New Year's Eve show, Sue runs out of the stabilizer. In a panic, Sue calls the supplier for more. but they remind her that Elizabeth is the only source, and they need to switch bodies to replenish the supply. With no other option, Sue, barely conscious, starts the switch. Her boyfriend, hearing strange noises from the bathroom, is concerned, but Sue refuses to open the door. Inside, Elizabeth's body is now a hideous bald woman with a grotesque hump. Finally, Sue yells at him to leave, and he runs off. Elizabeth, now a terrifying creature, calls the substance operator, begging to end the experiment. She then heads out to retrieve the final batch of substance. Returning home, Elizabeth drags Sue's unconscious body into the living room, preparing a syringe to inject her duplicate with a serum that will end her life for good. Just as she is about to do it, Elizabeth pauses. She looks around at the portraits of Sue, realizing she can't kill the younger version of herself. Instead, Elizabeth brings Sue back to consciousness. When Sue sees the half-empty syringe, she realizes what Elizabeth had planned. Enraged, Sue beats Elizabeth to death. Afterward, Sue heads to the New Year's Eve show, dressed in a stunning gown. But as she begins the broadcast, Sue suddenly feels unwell. Her teeth fall out, making it impossible for her to smile for the sponsors. Then, her fingernails fall off, followed by her ear. Horrified, Sue flees the studio and rushes home, where she injects herself with the last of the activator, hoping to create a new version of herself. Instead, a monstrous hybrid of both versions, Eliza Sue, is born. The creature recalls Sue's audition and tries to beautify herself, putting on a dress and a homemade Elizabeth mask before heading to the show. When she arrives at the TV studio and steps onto the stage, her mask falls off, revealing her monstrous face. The audience screams in horror, calling her a monster, and flees in panic. One man decapitates Eliza Sue, and her mutilated body floods the entire hall with blood. What's left of Eliza Sue runs out onto the street, disintegrating into a mass of guts. Elizabeth's original face manages to crawl to her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where it looks up, smiles, and melts away. The next morning, the remaining puddle of blood is scrubbed away, erasing all memory of the actress, and this is where the movie ends.